So the supposed proposed college sports tomorrow, essentially the college football super league that was pitched last week, has been really maligned for a couple of different reasons. And I think they're all somewhat valid. I talked about it on Thursday last week that I think the proposal sucks for a lot of different reasons. But I think you don't have to worry about whether or not the proposal sucks or not, because the next quote unquote super league is missing the three biggest components of having any possible chance whatsoever of being implemented or succeeding. It's really, truly that simple. It does not have the three biggest things. The first one is the support of television. It doesn't have ESPN and Fox Sports are not in on this Super League. And if they're not in on it, ain't going to happen. Number one, it's literally that simple. Because, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, that the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12 have hitched their wagons for better or worse. They have sold their souls to the TV devil, and they're not doing anything without the backing and support of Fox and ESPN. So it ain't happening. That's number one. Like, literally, it boils down to that. If ESPN and Fox are going to be forced to pay more money for college football, isn't happening. And the Big Ten has proven to be a very faithful steward of Fox Sports. And the SEC has been proven to have flat out hitched their wagon to the success of ESPN. So that's all there is to it. But then the other two aspects that the college sports tomorrow group doesn't have, that it needs to have, doesn't have, and probably will never have, is the Big Ten and the SEC. Those two entities are now operating as if, and it's not as if, they are the two big dogs on the block. And they're acting as such. And you could argue that they should have been acting as such for a really long time, because it's been trending this way for quite a while. Those two have been the preeminent brands in college football. And they're taking their ball, and they're being very protective of their ball. They're not going home with it just quite yet, but they're very protective of their ball. And they should be. They have all of the leverage because, quite frankly, any college football playoff tournament championship event that does not include the SEC and Big Ten, whether fair or unfair, isn't going to be viewed as a legitimate tournament, playoff, championship, whatever the case may be. If the Big Ten and SEC wanted to start their own college football playoff, they could, and they would be viewed as the national. Whoever won that tournament, playoff, championship event, invitational, whoever won it would be viewed as the national champion 9 times out of 10. Now, do I want to see that happen? No, because I don't want to see a fractured college football. I don't want to go back to the days of this entity says this team was a national championship. That entity says that team is the national champion. I don't want to do that. I want it to be settled on the field. And I want the Big Ten and SEC to not be afraid to play those games on the field. But the Big Ten and SEC, more than just about everybody else, are now operating under the guise that college football is big business. Because it is. It always has been. It's just taken a really long time for everybody to figure that out. And I think there's some apprehension in the past of being wary of how your fan base or how important people, i.e. legislators, would view college football, treating themselves as big business. But it is undeniable. The evidence is right in front of your face that the teams who are, everybody in the sport says the teams who are successful are the teams who have the most money. Now, how do those teams get the most money? Because it's a business, because it is big business. Now, is it a ridiculous business model where you get 2 great revenue streams, one TV, well, it's like 4 great revenue streams, really. one is TV money, one is ticket sales, donations, but then also suckering old rich white guys to put their names on things and give you money so you can give it to 18 to 23-year-old kids. It's a great business model. This is fantastic for college football. Like, they've got it all figured out. They got revenue out the wazoo, and they don't know how else to spend it. It's a great problem to have. But it's a big business, and it always has been a big business. And the Big Ten and SEC are now both operating as if it's big business, and they don't have to worry about the feelings of teams in the ACC, Big 12, MAC, Sun Belt, Mountain West, whatever the case may be. That it is a dog-eat-dog world, that it is like capitalism at its core. And the big get bigger, the rich get richer, the strong get stronger. And if you're not on our level, sorry. Hate that for you. But the Big Ten and SEC have eyeballs with the dollar signs on them, and are carrying around the burlap sacks with the dollar sign on them, figuring out how in the world they can get more straight cash, homie. And so they're operating that way. And so what do they get out of an 80-team college football Super League? Nothing? Okay. Well, then, probably not going to do it. And that's the biggest, those are the three biggest hurdles. They don't have TV. They don't have the Big Ten. They don't have the SEC. And if you don't have TV, the Big Ten, or the SEC, you don't have a viable college football Super League. You don't have a viable group that's going to break away from the NCAA. You just don't have it. And whether that's fair or right or whatever the case may be, it's just the way it is. Do you remember back in the early 2000s, there was a pretty big push that gained a lot of steam nationwide for public schools to, like public high schools, for instance, public elementary, intermediate, junior high, high schools, to implement dress codes or uniforms, I guess I should say, not dress codes, uniforms, because it was becoming a problem that the kids who wore Abercrombie and Fitch and Aeropostale and American Eagle were viewing themselves as, and I don't even think they were the ones viewing themselves, they were viewing themselves as better than the kids who couldn't afford to wear American Eagle and Aeropostale and Abercrombie and Fitch. And there was a push that caught a lot of steam for people to say, like, there should be uniforms in public schools because it would eliminate, the class system, and you wouldn't be able to tell who was poor and who was rich. And it's just a nice way to equalize the playing field. And, you don't have to worry about who's wearing what clothes, etc. It wasn't the people wearing Aeropostale, American Eagle, and Abercrombie and Fitch that were the ones saying we should institute a dress code. It was the people who felt like their kids weren't as cool, hip, popular, whatever the case may be, because of the clothes they wore. The Big Ten and SEC aren't the ones driving a breakaway group from the NCAA that includes the likes of West Virginia and Syracuse. West Virginia and Syracuse are the ones saying, like, you know what? We should really think about what we should do is we should break away from the NCAA. Like, let's pool all of our money together, right? Like, let's all, like, hey, Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska. We should all put our resources together, get really big TV deals, and then we'll all be included in this big Super League. When it's Syracuse and West Virginia who are the ones saying that, you're like, oh, I don't necessarily want to be included in that group. I don't know that I want you included in that group. And it's the same thing that happened with school uniforms back in the day. The kids that were wearing Abercrombie and J. Crew weren't looking at the kids that got their clothes from Goodwill and like, yeah, we should hang out. Like, there's just a class system, and that's how it is. And the people driving the ship wanting the change aren't the ones who benefit from, or are the ones who benefit the most from the change. The Big Ten and SEC don't benefit a whole lot from dynamic changes in the college sports landscape and structure. They don't. They already have a pretty sweet deal with the NCAA, with the TV networks, with the college football playoff. Teams in the ACC and the Big 12 don't have as sweet a deal as the Big 10 and SEC do. They just don't. And so what are they trying to do? They're trying to even the playing field, which kudos to them for trying. Kudos to them for putting together a system that, hey, you know what? If we can try to sneak this one past the Big 10 and SEC, we can slide that one past the goalie, see if we can get one in there. Kudos for trying, but you can't spit on their cupcake and tell them it's frosting. They see through that, and TV sees through that. And if you don't have the Big 10, you don't have TV, you don't have SEC, you don't have a college sports tomorrow, you don't have a viable alternative to the NCAA when it comes to college sports. So I give them a lot of credit for trying. I give them a lot of credit for trying to figure out a way, because it's all self-preservation. It's all, how do I maintain my status as one of the top upper echelon elite college football powers programs that I'm associated with? The Alabamas, Notre Dames, Ohio States, USC's, Oregon's, Florida's, LSU, Georgia's, Tennessee's, Penn State's, Michigan's of the world. Because they can see that, they see where this is headed. They can see where it is a Big Two. And if you are not a member of the Big 10 or SEC, it's not a great spot for you to be in the future. They can see that. It's not difficult to see where this is headed. And you got to figure out either, how do I bring them back down to our level, or how do I get on that boat? It's that simple. And so they're trying to say, how do I bring them back down to my level? It hasn't been successful yet, and I don't know the way that it's currently constructed is ever going to be successful unless the NCAA just keeps stepping on their thing, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. But there's got to be some really drastic changes for the SEC and Big 10 to go, you know what? Yeah, we really should think about adopting this proposal where instead of there being 30 to 40 teams in our quote-unquote Super League, there's 80. I don't think they're ever going to be on board with that number, with that access for 10 teams to be relegated and not and 70 teams that can't be relegated. Like, it's just a bad proposal, but it's the best shot the ACC and the Big 12 have to try to get back to an even playing field. It's just not going to work. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that you're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on a podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It really helps the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.